Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything They Don't Want You to Know. I am your host, Jesse Blaze Snyder, and I've got a rather personal episode for you today because I just recently lived it. Last week, a major publication ran a piece on me, and the guy they described, well, that wasn't me. It wasn't even a twisted version of me. It was some cardboard cutout stitched together from selective quotes and lazy assumptions, like I was a jigsaw puzzle that they didn't bother finishing before they shoved it in a box and labeled it non-binary. Because to deliver a nuanced depiction of who I actually was might have been, problematic to the narrative they were already planning on running with. So I'll be real with you. Reading the article felt like standing at my own funeral while people told the story of my life incorrectly, but with confidence. And that shook me. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because I did. Because I've been in this system. Because I know exactly how it works. Because I've seen how media isn't interested in truth. It's interested in story. And the truth rarely survives the narrative machine. But I knew the person who was writing the article and knew that they understood me a little bit and had a pretty deep appreciation of me for what I really was, I think. So I thought maybe this time I could trust that something close to who I really was would be reported. Not so. Now, when I was a kid, I used to think that this kind of manipulation was the exception, that maybe I just had a few bad experiences, but it's not. It's the rule. I've been interviewed hundreds of times for TV, print, radio. I've been asked the same questions 50 different ways until my guard drops and they get the quote they need to build the story they already decided to write. I've seen producers push narratives. I've seen editors inject spin. I've watched how easily human beings get boiled down into headlines. And once you see the process, you can't unsee it. So today we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about who controls the media, how it's used, why it doesn't inform you, it influences you, and how most of what you think is news is actually advertising, propaganda, curation. We're going to blow the whole system wide open, not from a place of bitterness, but from clarity, from direct experience, and from love for the people who are still out here thinking this machine was ever built for them. If you're interested in hearing me tear apart that article that they wrote about me, you can check out last Wednesday's episode of Coolest Geek Alive. It's titled Fuck Newsday. It's my personal retraction to last Sunday's cover feature in their life section. And it includes all the nuance and context which they conveniently chose to leave out. But now, if you've ever felt gaslit by the news, if you've ever seen the media twist your story, if you've ever felt like you were being lied to but couldn't quite prove it, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're not wrong. You've been living in a fun house of mirrors, and this is your invitation to walk out of it. So let's talk. Everything they don't want you to know about the media matrix. All right. So, who controls the media? Let's start with the obvious. The media is not free, it's not neutral, and it's not yours. It is owned. And I mean owned, as in literally. 6 mega corporations control roughly 90% of everything you see, read, hear, or scroll past in the United States. Who are they? They are Disney, Comcast, Warner Brothers Discovery, News Corp, Paramount, and Amazon. That's it. 6. And under those umbrellas, you get everything from CNN to Fox News, from Marvel to HBO, from the New York Times to ESPN. It's all part of the same web. Different masks, same puppet master. And this includes the selection of documentaries. Which docs are green-lit? Actually produced in the first place. Someone at the tippy top of these companies chooses that. And of the docs that are produced independently, which docs can never seem to find a distributor and just end up released unceremoniously onto Rumble or some such. You think you're flipping through different channels, reading different papers, getting different perspectives, but you're not. You're being fed variations of the same script, filtered through slightly different flavors of tribalism. And the real kicker? It's not just media companies owning media companies. It's the shareholders behind them. The same financial institutions, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, holding controlling stakes in every single one. So while you can count 6, the intellectual controlling body at the tippy top of this pyramid is ultimately one group of people deciding everything that you will know. This isn't journalism. It's empire maintenance. It's narrative laundering. It's the illusion of choice in a hall of mirrors built by billionaires. Now let's talk about ads, because the moment a news organization becomes dependent on advertising dollars, it stops being a news outlet and starts being a brand protection service. You want the weather? Fine. You want the truth? You're not going to get it from a network sponsored by Pfizer, Moderna, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. How is a media company supposed to cover war truthfully when it's being funded by the weapons manufacturers making billions from that same war? How are they supposed to tell you the truth about vaccines when their commercial breaks are literally brought to you by the makers of the drug? They can't. They won't. And they don't. This is not about left versus right. This is about power versus people. When your entire media landscape is owned by conglomerates who have direct financial stakes in pharmaceuticals, weapons, tech, real estate, and surveillance, you're not being informed. You're being conditioned. Not to see the truth, but to accept the system, to stay compliant, to keep your head down, and your mind divided. You're not watching the news. You're watching a commercial. And until we start there, until we admit that, we can't even begin to reclaim the truth. Let's keep going. This is manipulation by design. Let me explain something to you about media manipulation and how it actually works. Because it's not always bold-faced lies. Sometimes it's much worse than that. It's framing. It's editing. It's curation with an agenda. And once you see the pattern, it's everywhere. When I was on Rock the Cradle, I sat down for interviews that lasted hours. They'd ask the same question 15 different ways, just waiting for me to slip up, waiting for the version that sounded dramatic enough, cocky enough, weird enough to feed the story they wanted to tell. You see, they were out to make me into this cocky, arrogant, wannabe rock star who thought he was better than everyone else. And when they couldn't get quotes out of me that would paint me in that light, because that wasn't who I really was, and because I got hip to what they were doing at a certain point, they just kept me talking. Sometimes they'd ask me to say things a specific way, and then continue with my answer. And then I would find that they had clipped the specific way they asked me to lead into the conversation, and you don't see what I said afterwards. You only see what I accommodated them with, because they asked, could you say it like this? And then you can say the rest. But the rest was never aired. I remember watching those episodes air live on stage on a big screen next to all of the other contestants thinking, that's me. But it's not me. That's a character made out of clips. That's a story stitched together from sound bites. Not a human being. I remember hearing from the other contestants that they were giving them gold, infighting, talking shit about each other, but they didn't use any of it because that wasn't the narrative they were trying to sell. They wanted me to be the bad guy. It didn't matter that the other people were going out of their way to be bad guys. They had already selected me as the bad guy for the show. And here's the sick part. That is standard practice. The media isn't looking to understand you. They're looking to package you. Package your words, package your image, package your pain, your passion, your personhood into a headline, into a 2-minute segment, or a 140-character caricature. And that's not a flaw in the system. That is the system, working exactly as planned. Every gotcha quote you've ever seen, designed. Every misleading headline, intentional. Every time they ask a question that sounds innocent but is phrased to get a desired reaction, that's not journalism. That's courtroom manipulation with no rules and no judge. In court, you're not allowed to lead the witness. Hey, leading the witness. In media, that's the whole job. The job is to lead the witness. And the witness is you. And let's talk about public relations for a second. The ugly backbone of all of this. I almost majored in public relations because they didn't have creative writing and a couple of the other options that I had, like advertising, that I was going to do in college. But they said, oh, well, public relations is like advertising. No, it's not. There's an entire industry built on manipulating reality before it even reaches your ears. PR, public relations. And PR people, they don't find stories. They make them. They write the press releases. They frame the narrative. They polish the turd. They're literally paid to make villains look like visionaries. It's not a side job. It's not fringe. It's one of the most dominant industries in the country. Taught in nearly every major college. Celebrated. Normalized. You ever stop to wonder why we even need PR in the first place? I'll tell you why. Because the truth is too inconvenient for the people in charge. So they hire storytellers to reshape it before it ever touches your consciousness. And then, when all else fails, they simplify you. They reduce you to a single trait, a single take, a single mistake. Because the average person doesn't have the attention span for complexity anymore. And that's not an accident. They trained us that way. So now a whole life's work, a lifetime of nuance, gets boiled down to a phrase, a title, a punchline. And the machine moves on. But I won't. And neither should you. Let's talk about how they feed this monster. Let's talk about fear. The fear factory. Nowadays, when you watch the news, you almost always walk away feeling worse. And that's how you know it's working. Because that's the job now. The news isn't here to inform you. It's here to unsettle you, to scare you, to keep you anxious, distracted, and dependent. It's not just a flaw in the model. Fear is the business model. There's an old saying in the newsroom, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's not a joke. That's the algorithm. If someone gets murdered, that's the headline. If a plane crashes, that's wall-to-wall coverage. If a celebrity overdoses, that's front page for a week. If you feel safe, if the world feels calm, that's not profitable. What you're being shown every single night is a distortion field, a carefully curated nightmare, designed to keep your nervous system on edge so that you'll keep watching, keep scrolling, keep clicking. And it's working. Because even though the world is actually getting safer, the news is more terrifying than ever. Look it up. Violent crime, down. Poverty, down. War, down. Child mortality, down. But you'd never know it, because peace doesn't trend, stability doesn't go viral, and good news doesn't sell ad space. But there are many books written on the subject, of how things are actually getting better all the time. Now combine that with social media, and what you get is weaponized panic. These media companies, they know exactly what gets shared, and it's not the truth. It's what makes you feel something strong and immediate. Anger, shared. Rage, shared. Terror, shared. Tribal pride, shared. Righteous fury, shared, double shared. They know what headlines get reactions. They know what topics divide families. They know what triggers people to comment, to fight, to repost, and click again. All the information that Twitter put out when Elon Musk bought the company showed that they were literally putting people into rooms designed to get these sort of reactions. Comments, fights, reposts. And every time you do that for them, the companies involved, like Twitter, cash in. We become dopamine junkies for outrage content. And the people behind the curtain, they're not scared of your anger. They're counting on it. Because the more emotionally hijacked you are, the less clearly you think, the less you research, the less you doubt. You just react. You fall into place. You click what they want, you believe what they sell, and you become a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing. That's not information. That's psychological warfare. It's not education. It's entrainment. And it's not just happening on the screen. It's in the airwaves, in the apps, in the scroll, in the silence between stories. They've turned fear into fuel. And we've been driving on it so long, we forgot there was ever another way to move. But there is. Next up, we talk about what happens when fear isn't enough, when manipulation goes full black ops. Yeah, let's talk about psyops. Let's talk about the classified shit. The psyop layer. All right, now we go a little deeper. Because media manipulation doesn't stop at spin. It doesn't end with headlines. Sometimes it starts before the story even exists. We're talking about psyops, psychological operations. Real, documented, weaponized narratives. And no, this isn't conspiracy theory. This is historical record. Look up MKUltra, a CIA program that experimented on civilians with hypnosis, electroshock, and psychedelic drugs, all without consent. Look up COINTELPRO, an FBI op to infiltrate, discredit, and destroy civil rights movements from the inside. These are not guesses, they are confirmed, declassified, and that's just what they're willing to admit to. And there are more that I'm not mentioning. These operations didn't end. They evolved. They got smarter, more surgical, more digital, and today the battlefield is your mind, your emotions, your perceptions. When something wild happens in the world, a mass shooting, a protest turned riot, a celebrity meltdown, ask yourself, why now? What just happened that they don't want us talking about anymore? Let me give you an example. September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld stands at a podium and announces that the Pentagon can't account for $2.3 trillion. Gone. It's vanished. A story that should have rocked the foundation of the nation. But the next day, 9/11. And just like that, no one ever talks about the missing trillions again. That's not coincidence. That's narrative control. Sometimes big stories are not just reported, they're timed. Sometimes the news cycle moves so fast, it's not just about what you see. It's about what you're prevented from seeing. This is called strategic distraction. It's why a major celebrity scandal will break exactly when a damning government report gets quietly released. It's why whistleblowers vanish from headlines overnight. It's why we'll spend weeks analyzing a slap at the fucking Oscars, but spend seconds acknowledging that the government accidentally misplaced billions in Ukraine. You're not being informed, you're being misdirected. Like magic, it's sleight of hand. And if you pay attention long enough, you'll start to notice how certain patterns repeat. From crisis to solution to loss of rights. From scandal to distraction to memory hole. From fear spike to compliance bump to profit surge. This is narrative engineering. This is perception warfare. This is reality as a product. And at the heart of all of it is the media. Because no psyop works without distribution, without amplification, without a mouthpiece to repeat the message loud enough for you to internalize it without question. You think you're just watching the news? You're participating in a national hypnosis. You're being programmed in real time. And the scariest part? You might not even know what thoughts are yours anymore. So what happens when your entire reality is being edited like a movie? When the soundtrack, the script, and the camera angles are all chosen for you? What happens next? It's the digital age of censorship and silent control. Let's talk about it. What happens when they don't need to silence you because they've made sure no one's listening? Let's talk about the digital gaslighting era. This next part might be the most dangerous of all because we've reached a point where they don't even need to lie to you anymore. They just need to make sure you don't get heard. Welcome to the age of digital gaslighting, where the truth doesn't get banned, it gets buried. You could be screaming from the rooftops, recording the real story, filming the actual event, but if the algorithm doesn't like it, no one sees it. And that's the trick. They don't have to censor you violently anymore. They just make sure your voice goes into the void. They call it shadow banning, but let's call it what it is. Invisible censorship. The art of silencing someone by making it look like nobody cares. You're not banned, you're not deleted, you're just talking to yourself. And most people never realize it's not because they're irrelevant, it's because they're being intentionally erased from the feed. This happened to my first crowdfunded comic book, King of Kings. When we attempted our first fundraiser on Indiegogo, we were shadow banned because we were an R-rated comic book with sacrilegious themes, but we had no idea we had been shadow banned. It was 3 years later when it came out in the media that anything that wasn't mainstream PG-13 sort of content was all being systematically shadow banned on Indiegogo. I had been in a depression, thinking that no one was interested in the content of our book, which was very funny, very smart, and I thought important to the world and the conversation about religion. But the only people who had pledged to our comic were personal friends of ours who had been sent the link to our campaign directly. Why? Because being shadow banned means that no one can find your content, and nobody found ours. We eventually did the campaign again on Kickstarter, which did not have the same rules about R-rated content being shadow banned on their website, and it was easy to find, and we made 6,000. I don't remember now, 6 to 8,000, something like that, over $5,000. And the book came out, and everything was great, but I almost gave up on it completely because I was shadow banned, not knowing. And I'll add something too. We had talked to Kickstarter, we had talked to Indiegogo. An Indiegogo representative was telling us how great we were going to do on their website. I don't know for certain that they knew that they were shadow banning this kind of content on Indiegogo, but I suspect that they did. And it didn't stop them from telling us to use their website, which they at least should have known was going to get shadow banned on their site. Our book, our R-rated comedy about religion, it was going to get shadow banned on Indiegogo, and they literally told us to do it anyway. They didn't warn us, oh, well, a book like that's going to get shadow banned on Indiegogo. They don't care about you. They care about money. And then there's the fact checkers. Let me be blunt. Fact checking has never been about facts. It's about enforcing narratives. They slap labels like missing context or false on stories that are often absolutely true, but true in a way that's inconvenient. And for most people, all they ever read is the label, but click into the details of that missing content or false label, and you'll often find yourself going, how is this false? How is this missing context? It seems absolutely true. And of course, you must then ask, who is funding these fact checkers? Who decides which truths need a warning label? I'll tell you who. The same companies, the same ideologies, the same shadow sponsors who control the media machine. And don't even get me started on the fucking edit trail. The way online articles quietly change without saying so. The way headlines shift overnight. The way entire stories vanish from Google. Memory holding is real, and we're living in that era. They gaslight the past. They gaslight your senses. They gaslight you. You wake up one morning and remember something differently, but when you look for it, it's gone. The links are broken. The videos are pulled. The accounts are suspended. The reality you remember has been edited. Just made me think of this documentary on frequency and about how when the U.S. military would go to these undeveloped nations, as soon as we turned on our communication equipment, put up our towers for our radios, the hospitals would be inundated with meningitis and all of these other American illnesses, or not even American, but like the illnesses of industrial worlds. All of a sudden, they would become an industrialized world because of all of these frequencies. I went to go find that documentary 6 years after I watched it. Not even for an episode of this show. It was a long time ago to share it with somebody. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And at a certain point, you start questioning yourself. Was I wrong? Was it really like that? No. You're not crazy. You're being messed with. And I should say, it recently happened to this show. The Podcast Playground, the network that we're on, started advertising everything they don't want you to know almost 2 weeks ago. And yesterday, when Gentry went on to the ad server, the show was gone. It had been completely removed from the ad server. When he investigated further, the system told him that he had deleted it himself. Somebody said, oh, you got hacked. Yeah, I do 3 shows with the Podcast Playground, and the Podcast Playground does dozens of other shows. But only one show disappeared. Everything they don't want you to know. To which Gentry texted me, I guess they really don't want you to know. And trust me, they don't. But don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We're already back up on that ad server, continuing to advertise this show. But this is how empires behave when they can't win the argument anymore. They just silence it, not by force, but by filter. They throttle your reach. They tweak your timelines. They shadow your name, your face, your work. I've been shadow banned on Facebook, Twitter, all of it for years, simply because I didn't play their algorithmic games. I wasn't sharing the type of things they wanted shared. I wasn't having the type of arguments they wanted to be had. So they just throttled my reach. When I used to post, and I stopped posting on my professional page on Facebook, I have something like 13,000 fans on there. I'd get like 5 comments, 5 likes. No one would see it. no one would see anything that I posted. They didn't want me to reach those people with the types of things that I was talking about, the types of things that I talk about now on this show. It's a little harder for them to throttle everything they don't want you to know. But sure enough, 2 weeks into the show being promoted in the world, and we mysteriously disappeared from our ad server. It's not even funny. It's 2 + 2 = 4. It's just what they do. And meanwhile, we watch people who say nothing of value go viral, while truth tellers like me rot in the algorithmic basement. This is psychological warfare 2.0. They don't break your bones, they break your momentum, and then they gaslight you into thinking it was all your fault. But it's not. You're not broken. The system is rigged. And it's time we learn how to fight smarter, to unplug from the filtered feed and look directly at the machine behind it. Because next, we need to talk about the profit model behind all of this. How money, influence, and propaganda are now indistinguishable. Let's talk about how the media became a mouthpiece for profit. Let's call this section Propaganda and Profit. Here's what they really don't want you to know. The media isn't here to inform you. It's here to sell you stuff. Not just products, though. Ideas, agendas, people, wars. And the more you start to trace the money, the more you realize the truth doesn't stand a chance. Let's start with something simple. Advertising. If a media outlet relies on ads to survive, then they are not incentivized to tell you anything that might piss off their sponsors. So when Big Pharma spends billions a year advertising on TV, do you really think that network is going to run a hard-hitting expose on vaccine side effects? Or the opioid epidemic? Or the skyrocketing cost of insulin? Hell no. They'll fluff the data. They'll bury the studies. They'll bring on a medical expert who just happens to work for a think tank funded by Johnson & Johnson. And they'll smile while they do it. Now take that same logic and apply it across the board. Big oil likes to influence climate narratives. Defense contractors like to influence war coverage. Tech giants, they influence surveillance normalization. Agrochemical companies influence food science stories. And banks, they influence economic news and class division. Gaslighting, really. Every piece of content you consume is filtered through one core question. Will this keep the advertisers happy? If yes, it runs. If no, it dies in a Dropbox folder. Ever heard the phrase, breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Sounds official, right? Scientific. That's a marketing slogan, invented by a cereal company, pushed through ad campaigns, adopted by experts they paid, and repeated in media until it became cultural gospel. That's how propaganda works. You hear it enough times, it starts to feel true. And then it gets worse, because it's not just ads funding the lies. It's public relations firms. Entire industries exist to manufacture reality, to rewrite history, to clean up scandals, to frame lawsuits the right way, to humanize monsters. These PR people ghostwrite editorials, they plant stories, they provide pre-approved talking points to networks and journalists. They are the invisible authors of the news. This is something I talk about all the time on Coolest Geek Alive. Puff pieces, fan baiting, complete rewriting of actual reality to suit the companies releasing terrible content, to spin the narrative in their favor. Disney, famously, cannot have a loss. No matter what they do, no matter how badly they fuck up, they will always attempt to spin it in the media as somehow not being their fault. And it takes independent news media like myself and the hordes of great people on YouTube and social media to spell it out how it really is, to reverse the narrative which people like me have been able to do over a long period of time. But to this day, I've recently seen comments on coverage for Ironheart on Disney Plus from casual media watchers who still have only heard Disney's PR claiming that the fandom of comic-based media is a bunch of middle-aged man-babies, when really, Disney has just been consistently making awful, often inciting content for something like 8 years now. But the loudest voice in the room often wins, especially against those who only passively read the news. And that 8 years I'm referring specifically to Marvel. Disney has been fucking up a lot of their licensed, bought content for ages. I mean, The Muppets was one of the first of these things. And there's always some sort of excuse for why their shit fails to reach the audience. But it's not them. It's not that they made something that was bad. Never that. Thank you, public relations. So when you hear the word propaganda, don't think Soviet posters and war-era cartoons. Think Apple ads, think Netflix documentaries, think soft-focus interviews with corrupt billionaires. Think feel-good military tributes brought to you by Lockheed Martin. Think Bill Gates. Or if you're a fan of Coolest Geek Alive, think Kathleen Kennedy, the lady who has been running Disney Star Wars output since its inception and who had successfully painted the entire audience as sexist, racist phobes until the terrible quality of the work that they were doing finally caught up to the machine and killed Star Wars as a brand, I think possibly for good. This isn't just propaganda anymore. It's designer reality. And we're swimming in it. We're living in a world where truth is less profitable than narrative, where accuracy matters less than engagement, where clicks are more valuable than clarity. The media doesn't care if you understand the world. They care if you stay addicted to the version of it that they've helped build. And as long as we keep buying what they're selling, whether it's pills, ideologies, or politicians, the machine will keep printing more. But the machine doesn't exist in isolation. It has friends. It has partners. And some of its closest allies are in Hollywood, in schools, in science labs, and in history books. Let's talk about the propaganda feedback loop and how the entire culture is now one big copy-paste operation. What is the feedback loop? It's Hollywood, school, and state. All right, so now we know the media isn't here to report the truth. It's here to package a reality that benefits power. But here's the real kicker. The media doesn't work alone. It's part of a feedback loop, a closed circuit between Hollywood, the education system, science institutions, and the government, where each one reinforces the narrative of the other until it feels undeniable. You grow up learning it, then you see it in a movie, then it shows up on the news, then it becomes a meme, then it gets taught back to your kids, and suddenly it's not an opinion anymore. It's common sense. This isn't information. This is indoctrination with a nice interface. Let's break it down. First, you've got Hollywood, which is entertainment as entrainment. Hollywood isn't just dreaming up stories. They're testing messaging, normalizing surveillance, justifying war, making the military look cool, making corporations look noble. And they're not subtle about it either. Look at how many major films, especially action, spy, or war movies, have Department of Defense script approval. You want to use a military base, a fighter jet, even the words Navy SEAL in your movie? You better let the Pentagon read that script. And if they don't like what your story says about America, rewrite it or lose access. That's not fiction. This is policy. It's propaganda through spectacle. So we get endless movies about brave soldiers and patriotic wars, but none about the PTSD, the drone strikes, the blown-up weddings, or the veterans sleeping in alleys when they come home. We get endless sci-fi movies warning about AI rebellion, but never about AI surveillance, censorship, or centralized digital control. Funny how that works, right? Next, you've got school, which is involved in programming the premise. Textbooks aren't written to teach kids how to think. They're written to teach kids what to believe. History is a cherry-picked and whitewashed thing. Science is curated to support industry. Critical thinking is replaced with test-taking, rote memorization. And the longer you sit in those fluorescent lit classrooms, the more your brain wires itself to trust authority, follow orders, and regurgitate approved information for rewards. That's not education. That's training, conditioning. And it makes people primed for media manipulation because their foundational worldview was never theirs to begin with. Finally, you've got science. And I say that in quotes, science, which is only selectively settled upon. Please, let's be real about so-called science. It's not a priesthood. It's a method. And right now, it's being hijacked by corporations who fund the results they want to see. Peer-reviewed? Sure. But funded by whom? Studies can be bought. Data can be cherry-picked. And inconvenient truths like natural healing, holistic nutrition, or regenerative farming get sidelined for the same reason anything else does in media. They don't generate profit. They're not patentable. They're not repeatable. They're not part of the machine. The loop is the lie, you see. What happens when media, movies, school, and science all start saying the same thing? You believe it, don't you? Not because it's true, but because everywhere you turn, you hear it repeated. That's the feedback loop. You question the news, but the movie you saw backs it up. You question the history book, but your favorite podcast confirms it. Not this one. You question the science, but the TikToker in the lab coat assures you it is settled. It's not education. It's synchronization. And it's so seamless, so omnipresent, so constant, that you forget to ever ask, who decided this is the world we live in? Who wrote the script I'm reading from? And what happens when I stop following it? Because when you break the loop, when you unplug from that echo chamber, you don't just get your mind back. You get your discernment, your clarity, your sovereignty. And that's the biggest threat to the system that there is. But first, we've got to understand the last layer of this programming, the conspiracy theorist label, Operation Mockingbird, the real reason they want you confused and fragmented. Let's talk about some of the bonus layers of manipulation next. We'll call them the invisible mechanisms. Now, if you made it this far, you're not in the dark anymore. But let's shine a spotlight on a few more things that they like to keep in the shadows. The tools behind the tools. The systems that train the systems. We're talking about government manipulation, weaponized labels, state-sponsored information pipelines, and the intentional creation of confusion. Let's go. First up, Operation Mockingbird. If you've never heard of Operation Mockingbird, buckle up. This was a real CIA program that started in the late 1940s. Its goal? To infiltrate major news outlets and embed journalists who would quietly push U.S. intelligence-approved narratives. That's not speculation, that's historical record. It was exposed during the Church Committee hearings in the 1970s. They had people in ABC, NBC, the New York Times, Time Magazine, CBS News, even student organizations. And when it came out, you think there would have been, accountability. There wasn't. They just rebranded it and moved it deeper underground. And now, you don't even need planted agents. Most mainstream journalists have been trained inside the same echo chambers. They toe the line not because they're paid off, but because they don't know how to think outside the echo chamber anymore. Plus, who wants to be a gritty, hard-hitting reporter when you can be a shiny plant like Anderson Cooper? 2. The conspiracy theorist label. You know what else came out of the JFK assassination? The term conspiracy theorist. Weaponized by the CIA through leaked internal memos as a way to discredit anyone questioning the official narrative. They didn't even have to prove the critics wrong. They just had to label them and let public opinion do the rest. Now, anytime someone questions the narrative, boom, conspiracy theorist, dismissed, marginalized, shadow banned, just like I was. It's not a description. It's a spell. And it works. I remember my own father used it on me, sort of indirectly as a kid. I brought up some question as to the validity of something. I said, why would it be like that? Shouldn't it be like this? And my dad turned to me and simply said, if you said that on the news, they'd call you a conspiracy theorist. Wow. What a clever, simple, and insidious way to shut someone up. I didn't even know I was saying anything out of line. I was a kid. But my father had already been programmed to tell anyone who spoke outside the lines that they would be a conspiracy theorist to think that way. I was thinking simply as an inquisitive child. I don't even remember what it was that I was talking about. But I do remember that was the first time I was called a conspiracy theorist. By my own father, no less. For asking some casual questions about a subject that came up naturally. I don't remember the subject anymore, but I remember the label. Thirdly, the propaganda feedback loop. Now, we talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Hollywood and the media don't just reflect reality. They shape it. They test it. They pre-sell it. From military blockbusters to climate collapse, disaster porn, from AI savior stories to rags to riches billionaire fantasies. What you're seeing on screen is what they want you to believe is possible or impossible. They're writing the limits of your imagination before you even get a chance to form your own. And to understand why that may be important, I recommend you go back to one of the earliest episodes of our show. I think it's episode number 3 on the Hermetic principle of mentalism that states, all is mind. What the collective consciousness believes is very important for the way our reality behaves. And the most powerful people on the planet absolutely know this. Fourthly, education and media symbiosis. This one's brutal because it starts young, as you see. From kindergarten onward, the average kid in America is taught to trust authority without question, value credentials over intuition, repeat, don't question, treat history like it's settled. I went into writing fiction because it seemed like we had already figured out everything there was to figure out. There didn't seem to be any mystery or creativity in the sciences, so I chose the field of entertainment. If I knew then what I know now, I would have become a scientist. Definitely. I would have put my brilliant creativity to use for the world, to help make it a better place. But they don't want innovation in this world. They want sheep. By the time your kid graduates, their worldview has been baked in. The news doesn't have to work that hard. The foundation was already laid in school. That's why they all work together. That's why they're in sync. Because they're not just reporting information. They're reinforcing the training you've already had and your parents have already had. 5. The monetization of confusion. Finally, but maybe the most sinister of all, they don't want you to be informed. They want you to be confused. Why? Because confusion creates dependency. It creates fatigue. It creates the feeling of, I'll just believe what the expert says. Confusion keeps you plugged in, checking headlines every hour, scrolling TikTok for updates, toggling between news apps, just trying to make sense of it all. And guess what? Every time you open one of those apps, they profit. So they flood the zone with information, contradictions, half-truths, panic porn. Experts yelling over other experts. One story says coffee causes cancer. Another says it prevents it. It's not sloppy journalism. It's intentional noise. Because when the truth is unclear, the loudest lie gets heard. And when you're disoriented, you're easy to lead. That's where we're at. A world of professional gaslighters, a system of weaponized complexity, and a culture designed to keep you just confused enough to obey. But there is a way out. There is a way to unplug, to see clearly, and to take your mind back from the machine. It starts with awareness, then it becomes discernment, then it becomes action. Let me show you how. Let's talk about what we can do right now to break the spell. AKA, how to escape the media matrix. So now you know, this thing we've been calling the news isn't a window to the world. It's a screen. It's a filter. It's a program. But here's the real kicker. You don't have to live in their version of reality. You don't have to be confused. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to chase the truth through a fog machine built by billionaires. You just have to opt out. I'm going to give you 5 keys to walking out of the media matrix for good. 1. Support independent voices. Don't just consume, subscribe. Platforms like Substack, Rumble, Odyssey, and Telegram are lifeboats in a digital sea of manipulation. Support creators and journalists who aren't owned, sponsored, or scripted. 2. Ditch ad-based outlets. If a media company depends on ads, they work for the people paying for those ads, not you. Find subscription-driven outlets where truth matters more than clicks. And just think, too, of people that you might love on YouTube. Sure, they have ads in their content, but their ads aren't for the latest Disney film or the latest Warner Brothers release. Their ads are for other things that don't conflict with the content that they provide. Look for people like that. 3, aggregate, and cross-reference. Left, right, underground, international. Compare narratives. You have no idea how media savvy I got simply from observing the news narratives of other countries and comparing them to the American propaganda. Look for the overlaps. Look for contradictions. Look for patterns. You'll find them. The truth hides in the gaps. 4, study the hooks. Start asking, what emotional response is this article trying to create in me? Fear? Rage? Moral superiority? Recognize when you're being manipulated so you can step around it. Hint, you almost always are being manipulated in some way. Even I'm manipulating you in some fashion. At the end of the day, I'm not really a podcaster, even though I am a podcaster and this has become part of my livelihood. I'm an artist. I make music. I make comic books. That's what I really love and care about. If I didn't think that on some level people would be able to find my music more easily or find my comics more easily based on the fact that I do this show, honestly, I wouldn't do it. Granted, there's plenty of sincerity in what I'm bringing you. I care about this information. I spend my life studying this information myself, and it seems a little bit useless for it to just remain in my brain. I mean, this show in particular, I was already podcasting. I was already doing Coolest Geek Alive, and I was doing my music show, All Your Favorite Bands Suck, which largely, to some degree, are me as a professional musician, me as a professional comic book writer, wanting you to find my comic books, find my music. This show is a little bit more altruistic because I study this information. I like this information. I believe that people need this kind of information in their lives. And since I'm already doing these podcasts anyway, I'll go and bring it in. But I know that this gives me an opportunity to connect with people more deeply, that it helps me ingratiate myself to my audience, because I'm really giving you guys information that's hard to get in other places. And that ultimately, it might make you guys more interested in what I have to say as a musician or as a storyteller. So know that. And I mean, I think that it's okay, in this instance. I'm being honest with you about this, saying this here because I want you to realize that, even when it's good, it's cool that Jesse is going on and doing an entertainment show because he's read every fucking book on writing under the sun. And he's watched thousands and thousands of movies and read thousands and thousands of comic books, and he has information to give to us that he was using to make really good stories, to make really good music. And now he's using that to, on some level, manipulate the audience into recognizing that he is skilled in this area so that you might go engage with my stuff. That's okay. That's the best version of you being manipulated that you're going to find in this world. But it still is some form of manipulation. If it didn't exist, on some level, I wouldn't be here right now. And I mean, maybe there's a small chance that I might be if it was the only thing I could do, so I became a podcaster or whatever. But, generally speaking, there is a motivation behind everything that's being brought to you. Even this, today's episode, I just got manipulated by the news, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do my show on the media today. Me going, fuck the media. I'm going to go fuck them. Fuck them. There we go. I'm saying this because I want you to really look, really see. There's always a reason that these things are being brought to you. And if you found the show because it got advertised to you, well, there's a company that I work for, the Podcast Playground. They're hoping this show is going to catch on. They're hoping that this knowledge and this information that Jesse's bringing to you is going to matter to you, that you're going to be into it, and that we're going to be able to sell ads. And then we'll make money. We split 50-50, the Podcast Playground and me, and we'll make money. That's it. It just so happens that what I'm interested in bringing you is stuff that fucking changes this system. It just so happens that I'm somebody who has spent a long time studying these things. And I'm not just here mouthpiecing what the system wants to tell you. But there is a motivation. There is a manipulation at play. And I hope you respect me for saying, honestly, I just shared that with you and spoke about this because I want you to appreciate that I'm transparent about that stuff. I don't want you to feel like you're being lied to. I think that's fucked up. I think we should know every single time we're being manipulated in any way, shape, or form. And it felt important for me to say that to you. Every time when I was writing it and reading through the script, I kept thinking that I should add that. And I actually read through it straight on to the next key that I'm going to give you, number 5. And I stopped and I went back and I said, no, you know what? I want to talk about the fact that I'm manipulating you on some level. I am. Hopefully, it's a level that's good. And hopefully, I'm the right person to be manipulating you on one level or another. But I'm not manipulating you in the way that I'm saying things. I'm not trying to fuck up your mind with what I want you to believe. I'm trying to raise your awareness, raise your intelligence level, demonstrate to you that you're surrounded by people who are really trying to manipulate you and won't tell you that they are. But I did. I just told you everything, every level in which I'm manipulating you on. And, you know, every time you listen to my show, I will always be manipulating you on that level, on the level that I'm an artist, I make music, I make comic books, and I want you to find your way to those things. And I know that by speaking at length about various subjects, I can demonstrate to you the value that I have, the intelligence that I've collected, why I might be really great at music and why I might be really great at comic books, because I know a lot more than most people do about the world we're living in. But it's still manipulation. Anyway, I hope you appreciate that. Number 5, follow your values, not volume. Okay? This is an important one. Don't just listen to who's loud. Follow people whose values resonate with you. Watch for humility, consistency, and curiosity. I hope that you just saw humility in what I just told you about the way you're being manipulated all the time. People who have humility, people who are honest and consistent, those are the people you want to follow. Because at the end of the day, you are the media now. We are the media now. I am the media now. You're the camera, you're the editor, you're the filter. And when you unplug from their system, you don't just become a better consumer of information. You become a beacon of truth for others still stuck inside it. Even better, you become dangerous to the machine. I love that. I want us all to be fucking dangerous to this stupid machine. And you become beautifully aligned with what's coming next. The new world that people like us are going to help usher in. If this hits you in the heart, if this lit up something that's been flickering in your gut, if you're feeling more awake, more clear, more alive, then good. That means you're tuning into the frequency they've spent billions trying to drown out. Now do me a favor. Sign up now to get notifications when we drop the Jesse Blaze 9 album Masterworks box set and USB vault on Kickstarter. This is my life's musical legacy, remastered, remixed, and unleashed. Every album, every anthem, every truth bomb. And after that, brace yourself, because Sugar and Bones Magazine #1 is coming. My first quarterly anthology comic magazine with all of my incredibly talented friends working on it. It's going to be the fucking rawest, realest, most beautifully chaotic fusion of truth, art, rebellion, and rock and roll you will ever see. Plus, check out new episodes of Cool Skeek Alive every Wednesday and Saturday, where we break down pop culture and rebuild mythology. And please, come back here next Monday for another mind-blowing, soul-shaking episode of Everything They Don't Want You to Know. Oh, and also, All Your Favorite Bands Suck is still available everywhere but Spotify. There's 55 episodes, I think, of the show of all of my favorite bands. You want to get into some new music? Check out All Your Favorite Bands Suck. A lot of great bands being featured on that show. Until then, stay fucking free, stay fucking weird, and never again mistake this goddamn motherfucking matrix for your reality. I'm Jesse Blaze Snyder, and you've been listening to Everything They Don't Want You to Know. See you next Monday. Peace.
There's something in the water. There's something in the air. The proof is all around us. It's not a matter of time. Sure as the blaze in your eyes, I sense a subtle shift. Instincts I can't resist. Weary of wolves in disguise. Drunk on a gallon of wine. Red as lead you